the way that it's changed the way that we behave, the way we think, and of course, as the title suggests, the way that we communicate in the digital era. My name is Tyler Rice. I am a co-founder and VP of Business Development at the Digital Wellness Institute, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for today's event. We're delighted to have you here with us for what is the third annual Digital Wellness Day Summit. Now, some of you may be Digital Wellness Day experts, and others, this may be your first time. So the day itself is really an opportunity for us to increase our knowledge, embody that knowledge, and ultimately feel empowered to apply that knowledge in our daily lives so that we may optimize our own relationship with technology and ultimately with those around us. We'll approach the topic through a term called digital flourishing, and that refers to a mindful approach to digital usage that is rooted in positive psychology. It empowers us to take advantage of all of the amazing benefits of technology, like bringing together a global audience like we are today, while also avoiding its associated harms. So without further ado, let's get started today. And with me, I am pleased to be joined by four of the leading experts in the realm of communication in the digital era. First, Patrick Walker, a former foreign news journalist turned tech executive. Patrick's work focuses on the convergence of media and technology. Patrick was actually YouTube's first international employee and is now a co-founder of Uptime, a knowledge hacking app whose mission it is to inspire anyone to learn and thrive in a fast-changing world. Bailey Parnell is the founder and CEO of Skills Camp, a soft skills training company and a 2-time TEDx speaker. She's been named one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women and even created a nonprofit called #SafeSocial, which helps assess social media's impact on mental health. Oluwatosin Olabode is a certified digital wellness educator, a 2-time TEDx speaker, and an author of 7 books. He's a creator of #NoGadgetHangout and founder and creative lead of Doing Healthy Africa, a digital wellness consultancy and advocacy platform dedicated to helping young people build the stamina they need to thrive in the digital world. Last but not least, Mark Ostach, a globally recognized speaker on digital wellness and a frequent contributor to USA Today. Mark is also a 2-time TED speaker, a 2-time author, and a thought leader who encourages people to embrace a spirit of courage through vulnerability. Now, to our audience members, please put any questions in the Q&A as we kick off the dialogue, and we'll be sure to save a few minutes at the end to address them. We'd also like to give a big virtual welcome to anybody streaming live via LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. So welcome to the conversation. So I wanted to start the conversation by talking about the downsides of communication in the digital era. And, Oluwatosin and Bailey, I really wanted to start with you. And Olu, this is for you to begin. I was watching your TED Talk, and you said that as humans, we were created for social interaction. And technology has facilitated that connection and that interactivity like never before. So tell me, from your perspective, what is the downside of this? Because it sounds pretty great.
Yeah, actually it does. And I think in there lies the danger also, because we are in a time or we're in an era where access to technology, access to information, access to basically anything that you're looking for is easily reachable. What that causes in certain circles can be information overload. One of the concepts that we talk about within the digital wellness space is digital minimalism, for instance, the idea that you are focusing on the things that are valuable to you. Now, there are a lot of things that are valuable, but not everything is valuable to you. Our inability to be able to decipher which is valuable to me becomes an issue. And then you see conversations around the fear of missing out, for instance, which creates anxiety and other contexts of that nature. I think one of the downsides that we have to the extremely amazing access to information that we have is also an inability to be able to filter or manage those access of information that we have, because once you begin to have an overload, then it becomes very easy for you to burn out, and the aim is defeated. Technology is supposed to help, not worsen your situation.
Yeah, and Bailey, I wanted to learn a little bit more about your nonprofit, #SafeSocial. And, again, you described the mission to really help people gain the benefits of social media while mitigating its associated risks. So I'd like to focus on those risks. What are they?
Right. Well, that's exactly right, Tyler, is that you said the downsides of social media. In my language, I just call them risks. And the reason why is because through my lens, social media is a risky behavior like sex or drugs or alcohol. And in psychology, we would define a risky behavior very simply as something where when you participate, you expose yourself to potential harm. And we know for absolute sure now, just evidenced by what was just said, that you expose yourself to potential harm on social media and the digital spaces. So, it could be stress, anxiety, PTSD, harassment. I mean, literally the list goes on. And so these then would become risks and would become the downsides of using if you don't mitigate that risk. So similarly, honestly, to something like alcohol, this can be something where, yeah, you have some fun with your friends. Do I love my wine? Yes, I do. Have I learned how to do this in a very safe and responsible way? And certainly I live in Canada. Do we have all these rules around it to help people understand what are the risks here? All this education around it, licenses to use, licenses to serve, and really this ecosystem that supports people doing this risky behavior safely. And so in social media and the digital wellness space, what I really want is more people to start thinking about it almost closer to those other risky behaviors, and as opposed to, say, just comparing it to the radio or the television or something like that.
Yeah, and let's take a deeper dive into that. So, what are the risk factors that either parents or children or any concerned individual can look at? Because like drugs, like alcohol, a glass of wine consumed in moderation is recommended. It's healthy. Social media, is it the same? Is that in our forms of communication in really defined chunks? Okay.
You know what? So here's the thing, defined chunks is not so much about the time with social media. And this actually came out in my own thesis, which was that when I was looking at everything in the field, it was, okay, a lot of people are saying that social media is hurting people's mental health. And then there was this whole other stuff not talked about. There was this whole area of my thesis on research that found that social media improved the mental health of their participants. And so then I was there like, okay, well, what is going on in the interim? Like, what's going on in the middle here? What is happening in that time? And that proved to be overwhelmingly more important than the amount of time. If in that time, even if it's 5 minutes, I'm comparing myself, or I'm feeling envy, or I'm feeling frustration, then it's going to do damage to my mental health. But realistically, if I'm actually entertained, I'm actually learning, I'm connecting, I'm laughing, then I don't see how an hour or, half an hour on TikTok is inherently worse than half an hour on reality television if you are getting all those positive benefits. So that's really what practicing safe social is, actually. It's almost thinking like, if abstinence is not an option for you, if you're not getting off these things, how do I practice safe social?
Yeah, it's a great
Tyler,
framework.
can I just add to that real quick?
Please, Mark. Yes.
Love your perspective, Bailey. And I often look at it as it's known as the imitation principle, which is to say you reflect what you receive, or your inputs become your output in world. So I like to often think of like what we do and view online as part of our the digital calories we consume. So we reference PTSD. I often refer to it as post-traumatic scroll disorder. Right? When we're scrolling through our social media posts, we're kind of doing, the holy trinity of checking Facebook, Instagram, Gmail. And then before you know it, you've digested these headlines that are traumatic in nature, even though they might be micro, like, the headlines from the world news, or a friend that's doing a GoFundMe for a child that has leukemia that you didn't know. All those things are things you digest that impact what you reflect into the world. So it goes back to how are we becoming conscious of the digital calories we consume, and how that affects how we show up.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right, Mark. And what's funny is the thing that came out of my research as absolutely number one most important thing that indicated whether or not someone would have a good or bad time, and then moderated how good or how bad, was how they felt about themselves offline at time of use. And you're just right in that, which was if they felt good and they were doing things and they had reaching their goals, this same piece of content might motivate them and inspire them. It might be a travel blogger, fitness influencer, but if they weren't and they hadn't gone to the gym that day, or they hadn't done this and met their goals, then they saw the exact same piece of content and it made them feel, like I hate my life was the quote.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Patrick, I want to bring you into the conversation because you have a very unique perspective as one of the early members, team members at YouTube and Facebook. So can you share with us kind of what the promise and potential of those companies were in the early days that really enticed you to join? And then what challenges to digital wellness did you perceive while working at these big tech companies?
Great. Thank you. Yeah, well, it's very interesting, being one of the early employees of Facebook, of YouTube. I was actually hired by Google to help develop their international video strategy. And we had Google Video at the time, which was failing relative to YouTube in a pretty spectacular way. So I was part of a group that encouraged the acquisition and then integrated YouTube once it was acquired, and then ended up representing YouTube across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But what was amazing at the time was that it was really, barbarians at the gate relative to traditional media. There was a lot of talk. It was the darling of young users across the internet who were empowered to create and distribute and have a voice, which was very unique, especially when the iPhone came out and you could just shoot and upload directly from your phone. That was transformational. And all the big broadcasters were up in arms. They were suing YouTube. We were dragged through the courts in many different countries. We were actually looking to create partnerships with these big media companies, and they just refused to, and they thought this was going to die because, by the way, who would ever advertise against user-generated content, of how wrong they were. But at the same time, it wasn't the death of television, as people thought. But it was a very welcome admission into the world of media, where it went from people that were in power deciding what you consume, to one where you could have access to all sorts of different content instantaneously from all over the world, and multiple different voices sharing. And that became very important in the Arab Spring, for example, is important from the birth of a lot of new creative companies that really grew and benefited, like Vice, and a lot of creators, of course. And at the time, we didn't really have the issues of the negativity around social. That was very sort of early on. Facebook also had a similarly remarkable beginning, very welcome. Everybody was jumping on. It was the talk of the town, and they could do nothing wrong for many years, particularly when they embraced mobile. I joined Facebook actually in 2016, just when a lot of the negativity started to come up with the election, a lot of criticism around impact on news, a lot of criticism around, of course, with Cambridge Analytica. And I found myself representing a company that I still very much believed in, but there were a lot of things that we were essentially apologizing for all the time and trying to make some changes to adjust to this criticism. And I also decided at that time that I personally, after 3 years, didn't necessarily want to be that voice defending. I thought, there's some great people there, amazing teammates, but on a personal level, I believed it was time for more conscious approaches to tech, and actually starting new companies that from the beginning had care at the core of their sort of ethos, and would be designed in such a way where there wasn't a wrong turn. And this is around the same time that YouTube also came under a lot of criticism for the spread of fake news, for helping people go down these rabbit holes of negativity. I do believe that these technologies are relatively neutral, and people do create their diet just like they do on television or with their food, and that will determine their outlook. But there was a time, which is being improved, where the platforms or the algorithms, which were optimizing for view time, watch time, were also optimizing for people going down pathways that were very attractive, that little did they know were actually in many ways quite harmful to their well-being. And so Uptime, which we've created, is really about no wrong turns, and that everything you learn really is about inspiring you to be a better person, to improve your knowledge, to recognize short attention spans, information overload, and create an opportunity for people in a short amount of time with attention deficit due to this digital distraction, stay informed in a fast changing world.
Yeah. What I heard you say, Patrick, was the early promise of social media, YouTube, whatever user generated content, the Arab Spring and the role that played in it, was the level of authenticity and reality that it brought to users' experiences, and the political change that provided, and the opportunity for political change that provided. And yet somewhere along the line, it seems like that authenticity got morphed and changed into what became an opportunity to spread disinformation, what became kind of the over-filtered appearances and these lifestyle images that aren't reality. And so, Mark, I wanted to go to you because I'm a really big fan of some of the speeches that you've given to corporations in general, and you're talking about bringing authenticity back into that realm through being vulnerable. Can you share with people what that means? Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me out. What an important day, and I'm excited by those that are on the streaming live on the session right now. So this is an exercise that helps foster vulnerability in a virtual environment, and it started off as just a piece of content and a presentation, and it's now turned into a bit of a wave of encouraging organizations, both small and large, to bring empathy and vulnerability into the workplace. And it's through the prompt of, if you really knew me, you would know that. And then you share statements that are vulnerable. Think of it as like a spice level, mild, medium, and spicy. So I'll model it so the listeners have an idea of what I'm talking about. And now just picture CEOs from Fortune 500 down to new hires being onboarded during the pandemic, having a chance to do this virtually. So digital wellness listeners, if you really knew me, you would know that I have a 5 and a 7-year-old that bring my wife and I to the to the center of joy and chaos every day. If you really knew me, you would know that I have a brother with special needs who's in his 30s, who can drive and work manual labor, but has the same math and reading level of my 7-year-old son. If you really knew me, you would know that I loved the halftime show with Snoop Dogg and Eminem, but I was secretly sad that Kenny G didn't make a guest cameo appearance. If you really knew me, you would know that I often smile on the outside, but I don't always feel that way on the inside. And if you really knew me, you would know that my faith is really important to me and shows up in my work. So that's a range of ways you can just kind of get to know each other in an intentional way. And what I'm learning is that even though we're in a virtual space, that this exercise brings tears, brings laughter, brings common grounds for us to stand on that didn't exist based on our resume or LinkedIn profile or zip code in which we live in. So it's been really powerful.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's wonderful. And so, Olu, I wanted to pivot a little bit over to you because I'm intrigued by the opportunity that No Gadget Hangout and the work that you're doing to inspire communication and connection off screen, again, gives rise to that authenticity. So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think one of the themes that has been reoccurring across all the conversations we've been having so far is the intentionality that is required within the digital space. If our intention and attention don't align, it becomes very difficult for us to make meaning in the interactions or communications that we're trying to build. So what the No Gadget Hangout does essentially is a resource guide that helps people gain their control of their tech usage by leveraging on activities that do not require technology to build intention, to build attention. I give an example. You're having dinner, for instance, or you're having any meal during the day with your family. That's an opportunity to build bond. But a lot of times we're with our phones or we are sitting in the parlor as a family and the TV is on, somebody's on his tablet, somebody's on his phone. Like there are lots of ways where we can easily get distracted. What the No Gadgets Hangout does basically is to tell you, can you leverage on activities that do not require tech? Because we are now a merge of the online and offline world. So there's hardly anything that you want to get done that doesn't require one form of technology or the other. So anytime you have an opportunity to leverage on an activity that does not require technology, it's important that we begin to take it. So we usually organize events where we educate people on this, but more importantly, the name of the event is No Gadget Hangout. So it's a 2 hours conversation without any form of technology. And it's amazing to see how people are able to build that interaction, are able to build that face-to-face conversation. Basically, that's one side to what No Gadget Hangout does. The second is it teaches the principle of scheduling. One of the easiest ways to build intention is to schedule the activities that you do. So if you, for instance, decide that between a certain period of time is family bonding time, probably you're going to spend the next 2 hours with your children, it's important to make sure that your notifications are off or your phone is not even in the room. The challenges that we're having right now is that we dedicate a certain amount of time for our children or for our family or for work, and then other activities that do not fit into those times, we're also doing them. So basically, the No Gadget Hangout just overviews how we leverage on non-tech activities to build intentionality and true connections.
I really like that, and the idea of intentionality, being intentional in your professional life and your personal life, and making sure that that time is sacred, whatever it may be, that you're doing that with intention. And so Bailey, at Skills Camp, I know professionalism is a key tenet of kind of what you teach, specifically professionalism in the workplace and virtual communication and the role that plays in being professional. Tell me more about that, and ultimately, if you can build off of what Olu said and kind of setting those boundaries, where does communication play in being a professional in the digital workforce?
So yeah, professionalism in the workplace is one of my favorite topics because it's actually quite a controversial topic. Professionalism has changed dramatically over the years because of what, even in the world, like if we wanted to get into social justice realm of this, like that's why professionalism has changed. Here we're talking about the fact that we're also introducing this world of digital communications at another level. Of course, we've had digital communications here for so long, but I think for a lot of people when the pandemic hit, my company was always remote. But for so many people, this was the first time where not only were they just working from home, they were now living at work, and they were trying to balance this whole new world, literally. Like they used to even maybe just answer work email at work, and now it's at home. And so now it was almost like they came home and this was their personal device, and that related to their personal screen habits and personal social media and personal like streaming services, whatever it was. And now it was literally just the same device. And so you wouldn't think that would have such dramatic effects, but for the entire office culture of the world, it did. And they didn't know how to segment it anymore. Now, the next phase of this is that I'm also personally interested in, because I started my career in television and film. And so when we moved to the digital world and we moved to online speaking, and which I know a bunch of y'all can relate to here, suddenly what I'm curious about is, okay, best in class for presentation online is different than best in class for if I was doing, say, a presentation in person. And if I were benchmarking in-person public speaking, I might look at who is the best communicator of stories on stage, and I might look to theater performers or something like this. But now that we're doing screen presentations, it's like, okay, well, who's the benchmark of best in class? What's that whole industry that has been completely dedicated to making you feel something on screen? And so it just worked out so well for me, thank goodness, because I had the language of this space that I took for granted before, to be honest. Even little things like framing and lighting, which is why we were laughing ahead of time that for some reason my camera today is making me look a lot whiter and my hair a lot darker. I'll have to sort it out later. But in this world, I know that is part of the language now. And I think that we have at skills camp, so we're soft skills training, so it largely does relate to in the world of work. And then Safe Social is a little bit separate, but now I find they're blending more and more. And I'm going into companies and it's like, all right, well, we're here on this digital space. Yeah, I suppose what we think is professional today looks a little different. Now we include things like, what does your lighting look like? Because we've known for ages that if you light me from the bottom, you look scary. Like we've literally known this for ages in film and television. And so I suppose there's one side of the digital, which is, okay, how can we make these tools work for us to appear how we want to appear in our workplace? And then the second part of it is, wait, now that I'm on these tools all the time, how do I make sure that it's not blending over into making me feel unwell and stressed and this sort of thing?
So well said, Bailey. As you were saying that, I was thinking about how communication modes, the modality of communication has changed and evolved over time. So thinking about the workplace prior to the internet, obviously you had in-person communication, you had phone communication, and you had written communication. Now, I mean, my gosh, you have digital communication, email, you have text communication, which is a different vernacular than email. You have Zoom and video communication. All of this requires.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Tyler. I have even with my companies alone, I know we have email, we have the internal messaging, we have text, and it might be helpful, practically helpful for anyone watching, that the way I've set it up with my teams is that it's temporally based expectations. So if you want a response in this amount of time, it's email. If you want it in this amount of time, it's text or Slack. If you're calling, you better be dying. I don't really do a lot of calls. Yeah, asynchronous calls. I'm like, what's happening? I'm one of those people.
Yeah, Patrick and Mark, I want to go to you next. So Patrick, as a leader of a fast-paced, startup work environment at Upwork, how do you address this? How do you build this? How do you build effective communication into the culture of your team?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Uptime was conceived in the run-up to the COVID lockdown, but we launched and actually, completed the final version that we launched with during the lockdown. In fact, I was one of the first people in the UK to get COVID in the first week of March 2020. And I was a super spreader. My entire team got it, as did a couple of the clients that I'd met that week. So we shut down 2 weeks before the UK shut down. But thankfully, we already had in place a policy of flexible work. We already were using Slack. We had been deeply integrated with Google Hangouts. And so we were able to transition quite easily. And we had a very tight deadline, a lot of expectation from investors. And so, the team really did a phenomenal job using the digital tools available to achieve maybe even more than we might have done had people spend a lot of time commuting back and forth. That also allowed us to hire people no matter where they were, based on their skill set, not based on them happening to also be in London. And so on top of that, what was great for people's well-being is a lot of our employees based in London had really only been living there and at great cost to themselves because they wanted to be close. But many of them had children move back near their parents. Some moved back to their home countries in Argentina. We hired amazing designers based in Bali, living their best life, and just were amazing skills. Also started to do things like virtual meditation sessions with our team, offering different wellness opportunities. And my co-founders and I also quite like doing walking meetings. So we implemented a policy, leading by example, where, go ahead and have a walk in the park during the call, and, mute if there's a lot of noise in the background, but, spend time in nature, call from where you're comfortable, get the creative juices flowing by changing up your location. And also, create opportunity for yourself to get out of your house, because not everybody necessarily had a garden or had space they could go spend outdoors. So, we I would say are sort of a COVID era born company that is purely digital from the start. We still, now that you can come back, have a purely remote company, and we're able to attract people now where the expectation is that. And I would say if anybody is going to start a company, you should expect that some of the best workers are not going to want to come back in on such a regular basis, but you'll get great work out of them. Or at least finding the ones that are really capable of achieving great things with that flexibility of space. It's really been transformational, and it's quite nice because I think that will be we think that we're sort of a beacon of companies of the future that were really born during COVID, all digital, that will start to have global implications for others.
Yeah, a lot to learn from Uptime. Mark, in your experience speaking to corporations, to companies, what tips are you giving them to communicate effectively in this remote era?
Great question. Just to build off of what's been shared so far, I think the biggest pain point or concern that organizations have is what does the culture look like in a hybrid workspace? And for purposes of this panel, we'll just define culture as like communication, or what I've been referring to as social connectivity. So regardless of where and how you communicate, how do we get rid of the transactional nature of the back-to-back Zoom or team sessions and just put a little bit more emphasis on the relational side? So what I've been encouraging is for folks to get back to the basics. So whether you're back in the office or at coffee or at an event, ask 3 simple questions. How are you? What are you looking forward to? And how can I support you? It sounds a little simple, but it's giving people a chance to renew connections. And then I also think that there's this place, and Patrick was referring to it, whether it's walking meetings or going out for fresh air. I refer to them as turndown techniques. So one of the things that I've gotten as a pulse through some survey and some feedback is that overwhelm seems to be the word of 2022 for many of my clients. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, how do you take micro moments, 5 to 20 minutes, and engage in what a turndown technique is, which is fast, free, fun, flexible, and doesn't require an Amazon Prime subscription. So there could be things like going on a walk, could be doing the dishes, completing a quick task, building a Lego set, something tangible, physical, free, and fun with your hands. And what it does is it separates you from that digital demand and allows you a little bit of margin in your mind to begin renewing the kind of relational side of, okay, I can reconnect with myself. I'm turning down the volume through this turndown technique. And then I'm going to jump back into my next session and hope that I can kind of set the tone with some sort of relational prompt like, hey, this is what I'm reading. This is what I've heard. Here's a picture of my kids or my dog or my cat, or something that just kind of sets the tone before you get into the to-dos. So I'm just emphasizing clients and organizations to say, hey, can we just be more intentional on the relational equity that we're trying to build in a hybrid and socially disconnected culture?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Mark said. I think it's also important that we emphasize the understanding of screen time break, because one of the things I've noticed with clients is that we take breaks, not necessarily screen time breaks. So you've had probably 2 hours Zoom or Slack interaction per se, and then you're supposed to go on a 15 minutes break, and then we were using our laptops for the Zoom meeting, and then you leave your laptop to your smartphone, and then you're on WhatsApp or you're on one social media or the other. You haven't really taken breaks from screen. I think it's super important because it was giving illustrations like taking a walk or what it is that you're passionate about. Some people it's yoga, some people it's meditation, whatever it is that works for you that is non-tech. I think it's super important that we understand that, because a lot of times we confuse it. We just think it's the idea of taking breaks from work. It's taking breaks from the screen, taking breaks from technology. That's how you get more productivity.
I'll just add one last thing. It's called the 20-20-20 principle. So for every 20 minutes of screen time, you could, to rest your eyes from the blue light, stand up and find an object 20 feet in the distance, refocus your eyes on that object for 20 seconds. And that'll help kind of just cleanse your digital palette. And then you can get back for another 20-minute burst, pause 20 feet in the distance, look at the object for 20 seconds and keep going.
Yeah, okay. No, you can go ahead.
Yeah, we're all very into this stuff clearly, but I find that when you're operating through the paradigm of social media and digital use as a risky behavior, it sometimes helps people understand everything that we're all saying, because you're like, oh, well, if I were to talk about any other risky behavior this way, I sometimes spend hours there without breaks. I sometimes black out and don't remember what I did for the last hour. I sometimes put myself in physical danger because someone has bumped into me or a car has honked at me. And it sometimes harms my relationships because someone is saying like, hello, like I'm talking to you. And if we were talking about any other risky behavior and I said, I black out, it harms my relationships, I put myself in physical danger, and I'm literally physically ruining my eyes and my carpal tunnel, whatever, you'd be like, oh, we should do something about this. And so in this paradigm as well, you might call it digital detox. Yes, sometimes you can continue drinking if you know how to do it safely, but maybe some weekends you won't, and maybe some days you won't, and then you'll figure out what you miss and what you don't.
Yeah, I was going to add that, and this conversation that we're having goes to things that we're passionate about and things that we're not passionate about. It's very easy to take break from something that you're not enjoying, but probably you're watching a movie, for instance, now, or you're having an interaction that is very passionate to you. It becomes a bit difficult for you to take these breaks that we're talking about or to follow some of these strategies. So it's super important to consider that the conversation affects the things that we're passionate about as much as it does the things that we are not so passionate about, or the things that are unhealthy to our digital communication.
Yeah. So much has been said about, what we need to be conscious of about communication in the digital age, but I want to take time to celebrate and call attention to all the things that is of benefit to us communicating in the digital age. And Bailey, I know you feel strongly about this, so I want to invite you to share that with us.
Oh yeah, I do. And that's the thing about risk mitigation and harm reduction, is you are saying you can reduce harm to have a good time here. It's just saying with alcohol, or name your risky behavior of choice. So I think for me, I've experienced myself a lot of the positive sides of social media. I mean, almost literally everyone at the Digital Wellness at One Point Collective, I connected with on social media, they saw my TED Talk or something like this. And this I would all say is a positive benefit of social media. And then you go even further into, I mentioned briefly, I'm pretty active in the social justice realm as well. And so there's unparalleled what social media did for people who didn't previously have voices and who weren't taken care of, or for the queer kid who thought they were literally the only one in their small town. And now they're like finding each other online. The fact that communities can find each other online and almost like find their family can be used for good and can be used for bad. But pretty much like Promise and Peril, as you've already said, I'm interested very much so in how do we get to that good? How do we get to the benefits? And that was honestly the focus of my whole research. I feel like we've done a lot, and probably every panel today will talk about what's going wrong here. And there is a lot going wrong, but I'm interested in, okay, but there is a whole group of people that are having a good time and that are making this work for them. And that if you're like me, and I imagine y'all here as well, are getting business from social media, are connecting with people across the world, are learning things I never even knew I wanted to learn, or seeing places I didn't even know I wanted to travel. So this is the part that I want to get us to. And I think it's possible. And that's the thing is I talked to a lot of young people today who really feel disenchanted. And I think they've lost some hope, and they've lost some vision, and they've lost some ability to believe that it can be good again.
Yeah. Well, I want to invite any audience member joining us via Zoom to add any questions they have in the chat, as we'll dedicate the last few minutes here as we wrap up to answering those. But while we do that, I just wanted to close out by giving each of the panelists an opportunity to speak to kind of wrapping this conversation up and giving audience members an opportunity and some key takeaways that they can leave this session with. And I wanted to just kind of give 3 themes that I've heard throughout the course of this conversation. And, you know, as it relates to communication, best practices, it sounds like it's authenticity. It sounds like it's setting boundaries. And it sounds like it's intention and being intentional about the forms and the ways in which we communicate. So again, intention, boundaries, and authenticity. Patrick or Mark, can I start with you as kind of speaking to 1 or 3, you know, one of those tenets and giving somebody an example of what they can do to take away?
Sure,
I'll jump in. I mean,
okay.
I think it's been said, but, you know, really think about social media use as a diet, and recognize that you are being pushed stuff that is unhealthy for you, just like in the non-digital world. It's very, very much the same. And recognize as well that the algorithms are oftentimes going to favor that because it will get you to spend more time. Think of it as sugar rush media. And having worked inside YouTube and at Facebook, there's a lot of hand wringing, and how can we elevate the healthy stuff, the vegetables, not just the sugar rush in digital terms, you know, to the top of the feed. And there were efforts there, but the fact of the matter is, you know, the business model doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. It wasn't driving a lot of the good ad dollars. And so you're going to have to be very conscious in your choices. It's about who you follow, filling your, you know, the people you follow with people that inspire you, that are inspirational. Sure, you're going to binge on the sugar rush content on a regular basis, perhaps, but recognize that it's also there to sort of entrap you and keep you there longer, and being aware. So, you know, I'm not, you know, tech good or bad. It's really about recognizing the power of the algorithms, which are getting more and more powerful, understanding your ability to make choices for yourself, just like with your diet. Don't kick yourself if you find yourself going down the rabbit hole from time to time, but know that you do have a choice, but you have to work at that choice. And that's something that I think a lot of us need to keep in mind. You need to be more and more empowered, and you need to stay informed as to how these platforms are changing.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, Tyler, if that's all right.
Yes.
I think that if we, you know, it's that blend of the physical and digital world. So, you know, Bailey was mentioning it earlier, but I like to think of it as, if you're going to like say, hey, I'm going to take a digital fast for an hour, I'm going to just create some healthy boundaries. The way addiction works is that we need to replace that time with something else. So if you don't have like a replacement of what it is you're going to do at that time, you're going to be like, hey, there's that hour I was going to take the digital fast. I've got nothing to do but twiddle my thumbs. I'm just going to hop back and doom scroll, right? So just find yourself replacing with the physical activity. And for me, I think protecting kind of the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes of my day as like sacred non-digital spaces. It's like your brain is a sponge. Whatever you dip into is what you're going to wring out. So for me, I'll journal in the morning. I'll read devotional, scripture, do my thing that works for my worldview. And then I'll pick up my phone and like text people a few messages of encouragement, or, hey, I'm thinking of you. You were on my mind today. And that's the way that I blend kind of like starting the day physical, writing, and then getting into a digital space. And the last thing that I'll add is I do believe that there'll be a future of people. I like to refer to them as dippies or digital hippies, where they just say peace, love, and flip phones or no phones. And I think that that's going to be like a subset of this conversation in the future, where it's like, hey, my parents were so burnt out and overwhelmed, and I love YouTube and, you know, Uptime and all these other apps, but I'm going to go back to a different, you know, a digital hippie lifestyle.
I just don't drink.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I do.
Yeah, we know what happens with just say no, though. Just say no didn't quite work, I think.
Right.
Haley, I don't know if you and Olu want to close it out with two,
Yeah.
and then we do one question I wanted to get to, but let's give you.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Olu.
I think one of the things I will add, I think one of the things I will add also is the importance of setting up these boundaries. It can't be overemphasized. Technology was created as a tool for us to use and not technology using us. Instead, one of the conversations I have with freelancers, for instance, is if you do not have working hours, that means you will work every hour. What that implies is that your clients can reach out to you 10 p.m. in the night, and because you didn't tell them they can't reach out, you have to, or you feel the need that you have to respond. I think it's super important that we build boundaries and let people know about it. One of the ways you can do it within the digital space, for instance, is setting up a communication charter. Basically, that overviews your values, your medium of communications, the best times to reach out to you, depending on the kind of message that is being sent across to you. That also guides the kind of platform that is being used. So if it's urgent, it might be an email, or if it's a live and dead situation, it might be a call. I think it's super important that those that you're in close proximity with have that understanding, so you're able to have a balanced personal, social, and professional life. Because one of the challenges that we're facing now, and as a result leading to burnout, is that we have more of a professional life than we do our own personal life or even social life. So it's super important that we have boundaries and those around us understand what that means.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, we have one question, and Patrick, this is going to be impressive if you can answer this in 60 seconds or less. But the question is from an organizer of 250 young girls at a STEM event at Duke University. And the question is how AI is impacting our digital wellness, especially for young girls, and the role that algorithms can play in making it difficult for us to set digital boundaries. Give me the 60-second answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a big question, but just recognize that it's not that the algorithms are evil. It's just that the business model of the big social platforms is advertising. Advertising requires eyeballs. Eyeballs require you to stay on site longer. So everything is designed to keep you on longer. Now, keep you on site longer often means the sugar rush content that isn't necessarily good for you, whether you're male or female, but particularly impressionable young women can get into lots of challenging situations with regard to their own self-image. That Instagram, I know, has struggled with a lot, but it's a really important topic and definitely well worth talking about with all sorts of people, particularly young women who are oftentimes comparing themselves to others in ways that can be unhealthy due to what you see on Instagram in particular and TikTok.
Thank you. That was impressive. So everyone, thank you so much to all the panelists. We really appreciate this opportunity to connect, to communicate in this virtual world, and to really help others take some key knowledge away from this. Really, I think authenticity, boundaries, and intention is kind of the three key terms of the day. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the participants. And we look forward to continuing Digital Wellness Day momentarily. Thanks, everyone.